So let's recommence. 10 past. So we're on to item 11, adoption of the Hawke's Bay Regional Council 14-15 annual plan. And I'll hand that over to Mr. Drury to kick us off.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, the adoption of the 14-15 annual plan. This is the last phase of it. I refer briefly there to consultation. You're aware of all the consultation and the written submissions and the oral submissions, and the submitters will be written back to with Council's comments. In the body of this first page here, I allude to some changes that have been made in the draft plan. Wording changes, I refer you to wording changes to cover the Napier-Gisborne rail. There's been a couple of more paragraphs put in there to reflect Council's resolutions in regard to the Napier-Gisborne rail. The financials, not a lot changed in the financials, but there has been, for the moment anyway, 200,000 put in for plan change for oil and gas exploration, and at the moment the plan has funded that out of the Open Spaces Fund, which, as you know, is a fund we borrow against, or fund by borrowing. So that sits there at the moment. I'm happy to talk about that a bit.
Should we do that now, Councillor Scott?
Yeah. I was trying to find the funding policy and the long-term plan. Mr. Chairman, I just query whether we can actually borrow money for consultation. I think it's probably against Section 100 of the Local Government Act, and I know somewhere in our financial policies there is no borrowing for operational matters. So I think under that was the borrowing is for something that is more intergenerational, isn't it?
Yes, Councillor. It's a tricky one, really. I like you, thought that the Local Government Act would have it in big neon lights. You daren't borrow for operating. So I did talk to the Audit Office earlier this morning to try and get a ruling from them, and they've written to me here, and they've had a scan through the Act, so they say, and they cannot find anything that would specifically preclude this from a legal standpoint. However, it's not recommended from a financial prudence perspective. And as you allude to, Councillor, Section 100 says operating revenues should balance with operating expenditures, and operating revenues can be reserves, but it's arguable whether indeed operating revenues are borrowing. So I think there's a question mark on it. They probably would refer to such a thing, and this is them in their audit letter, so would get a reference of such action.
Mr. Chairman, this one's a little bit different because there is a non-rating income source that funds whatever borrowing happens there. But as far as I'm concerned, I think that it was proposed by Councillor Belford, and I think I seconded it, because there's a job that needs to be done, and it came up suddenly, came up the day before. If there's some other way of doing it without involving that funding, then that's fine by me.
The facility for a $7.5 million borrowing on that was consulted on through our long-term plan, and it's absolutely specific in the policy that that is to be borrowed for. So it wasn't a borrowing for a source of funding for everything. It was a funding for open spaces, and that was what was consulted on, and that was what was agreed.
Can I ask a question which may help progress this? My understanding is we have a fund or a chunk of money for plan changing, etc. If this goes up the ladder, my view is it should actually fall inside that current envelope. I know that's challenging because it's probably already been allocated and the work streams are in place, but we made a commitment to lead the charge on oil and gas, and I think it's important that if it's important to us, we need to find a way to fit it into that current structure. And I just wonder if Mr. Maxwell might have a comment on that, considering he's not entirely sure yet what the work program might look like.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I guess the one thing that stands out for this process is that a fairly clear signal from the Parliamentary Commissioner that a national policy statement is required to deal with this industry at a national scale. And our planning documents are subservient to that, so our planning documents would need to give effect to any NPS that came out. So I guess there's two parts of it. One is sort of consulting with the community and forming a view about what the future might be, and working with the territorial authorities in that sense. I'd just caution about how far we might be able to take that until that initial conversation or consideration by central government around an NPS or a similar instrument goes. I mean, it would be great to get some guidance or leadership from central government about whether they intended that or how quickly that might happen. Because if it's a decade away, then yes, this council should probably get on and deal with its business now. If it was more imminent, then perhaps we might be wise to consult with our community, engage their views, but not get into the formal planning space until we have the NPS and we have a clear understanding of what we have to give effect to.
Granted, but I'll come to you, Councillor Belford. Granted, but the challenge I see is, we still have this conversation happening here in Hawke's Bay. So whatever form it takes, I'm not trying to prescribe that now, but the signal was sent that we are interested in pursuing this. I'm just very uncomfortable where the money might be coming from. We don't know what we need yet. We don't know what the format might look like. We don't know what the program is. So I guess the message is, regardless of where the funding comes from, we want to pursue this with a little more vigour than we have done in the past, perhaps. And is on the basis of the unknown, which is your challenge, is there any way that any of this work could fit into an existing budget?
It doesn't sit in my budget, so it sits in strategic development with Ms. Codlin, and I can't speak for her. I don't know whether Mr. Drury has any more details about what's available there, but I guess I would point out that the council has a fairly challenging work agenda in that space with the tank process, the Mohaka catchment to be resolved, as well as implementation of the Tuki outcome. So there is quite a demanding workload in that space, and I'm not sure whether that provides any flexibility to add something else in.
You certainly can't speak on her behalf. Councillor Belford.
If I knew this were going to be relitigated, I would have brought more material with me to re-argue the proposition, but 2 points. One is that the recommendations that the Parliamentary Commissioner made called for some very, very straightforward fixes to regional plans in this situation, such as does a application routinely get notified, as a for instance. That doesn't seem like something that we would have to spend several years on developing a position on. I think and there are numerous examples of that in her specific recommendations as to what specifically regional councils should be getting on top of before the curve, not after. So I don't buy the argument that we should just sit and kind of wait to see what comes from central government on this. There were very clear things that are kind of obvious to me on their face. So I would say we should be prepared to get on with it. I also think that when we discussed this last, you noted, Mr. Maxwell, that you had just gotten a further application or a consent application from who? Tag Oil? Someone? I thought so that when the commissioner wrote her report, she referenced the fact that there were applications kind of sitting, waiting in the wings. She issues her report, and I think literally the next day we get an application here in Hawke's Bay to do this. I don't think that's coincidence of timing. So these applications are going to be right here, right now, probably more of them. So I just want to repeat what I feel is the urgency for us getting ahead of this. I don't care where the money comes from, whether it's this fund or some other fund, but I want to stand by our earlier decision that treat this with urgency and make sure we find the resources to do it.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not suggesting that we dumb down the urgency of this, not at all. What I'm suggesting is that we take a considered approach to getting it right. And I don't believe that any plan change is as simple as writing a change of policy and rules and it's quickly adopted. I think history shows that plan change processes are typically vexed and take some years to develop and get through the statutory processes. So I guess my only caution is not that we stop considering it or make some significant progress towards it, but that we carefully consider not only our interests and the work that we have to do, but how it fits into the national legislative framework, and also that I think there was the impression I got from the discussions is a strong suggestion that we would do this in a collaborative way with our territorial authorities who control the land use planning, because the Parliamentary Commission was very clear that it's not just about any potential effects, but it's where the industry might develop in the future. So that we should just make sure that we've framed it in the right way and progress it. And like you, I don't have a view in terms of where it's funded, but I'm just cautioning that we would want to carefully plan it to get it right and to make it work properly.
Just to follow on from that then, so that work program presumably is in kicking off, you know, the full digestion of the report, what we might do, perhaps the Chief Executive could answer that with a bit more clarity, being a planning matter of some sort.
Yes, so the Parliamentary Commission of the Environment's report is being considered across the sector, and obviously the implications of that. In terms of the this Hawke's Bay Regional Council, one of the, we've been asked, or it's been moved, and certainly it's in here at the moment, that we undertake or make financial provision for undertaking community engagement and towards some planned policy development around oil and gas exploration. Obviously, there is the issue about where the funding comes from, and from what I'm hearing, if it's possible that it comes out of existing planning budgets, then some people are comfortable with that. I'd be reluctant to move that any further until I've had a good chance to have a talk to Helen Codlin about the work program and the drivers for what they're currently doing at the moment within the budget that's been allocated to them. For example, there's a work around the tank process, and so how important is the Hiratonga Plains, and how important is the Tāharua Mohaka plan development. Where do they sit in the priority list, I guess? And so I'd be reluctant to try and second guess where she and her team may see that actually happening at the moment.
Ms. Collins on her way down.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can we come back to this? Because I think it is quite important we're very clear where the money comes from. It's only an allocation, but it's important. Okay, Mr. Drury, you want to carry on with your...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No. Apart from the recommendations which incorporate the ability to borrow for the capital work program as listed in the plan, I would. There's nothing else. Oh well, I would say that of course the underlying deficit for the draft plan of 7,000 is now moved out to include the carry forward, so you've got a deficit of just a little over 400,000, but considering you carried forward 400,000 of expenditure, the deficit for the current financial year, 13-14, will be 400,000 less, and the final plan reflects a deficit of 400. It's just merely carrying expenditure over.
Okay, any questions? Oh, how's it? We'll get there. Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, I'm just looking at page 282 in our papers, which is the sort of opening summary, and it's got there. The NGR group has estimated investor funding yada 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 at 10.7 million. We know that figure is now 15.5 to 17, I think. And I'm wondering whether we shouldn't be updating that information.
Oh, that's, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, I mean that we've left in what was in the draft and put the last two paragraphs that indicate council's response. I take your point that the figures have ilted, but these figures are moving continually anyway. Also, in the initial representation from the Napier-Gisborne group was that this council might like to be a 51% shareholder, and I think that is now amended as well. So there's, I suppose what I'm saying is there's quite a lot amended there. I think what I've opted to do is to say what is in the plan as far as numbers are concerned, and how council sees this moving forward.
And I'm not suggesting that the numbers in the annual plan change, but we've got more recent information than the summary contains, and I think it should be updated. That's the point I'm making.
Okay, no, thanks for that. Yep.
So, sorry, there's one other point, Chair, if I may, and it's on page 297, investment in Wakatu Road and Rail Hub. So the long-term plan, this is what the commentary says, long-term plan had provided for a 17 million advance to HBRC for the Wakatu Road and Rail Hub. Funding is no longer required for this project in the 2014-15 year. I'm aware that that's still a project that we'll come back to, so I just want to understand how the long-term plan gets updated and what happens to this. Does it just sit there in advance until we pick it up again, or I just want to try and understand the linkage between the annual and the long-term plan, if you like.
Yes, I mean the long-term plan had this in, and what we're saying, the long-term plan for 14-15 had it in, and we're saying there that this annual plan for 14-15 doesn't have it in. It may come up later, and indeed I think the Chief Executive summary at the front alludes to this project will return if indeed there's financial justification for it to return. I think when we do our LTP, which is a few months away, when we do that, we need to decide whether that goes back in, and if it does, how much and at what time. Yeah.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Scott.
Yes, I just wanted to come back to the point that was raised by Councillor Bevan over this, because this is the final plan, not the draft plan that was consulted on, and I do think that the final assessment on that Napier-Gisborne Rail needs to reflect where we ended up, which actually was only affirming that 5.3 million, but the options could be a reduced shareholding, or could be.
So just repeat that. You think
in
the commentary here it should reflect that?
Yeah, I think the commentary should reflect that that the circumstances had changed at that time, and that council needed. It should actually the commentary should reflect where we ended up at the resolutions of the plan.
I've got some